And now let's just take a quick break from our exciting stories to tell you about Dave's Killer Bread. Steve, you know I'm a musician at heart. I studied music in college. I was standing in the bread aisle yesterday holding 2 loaves of Dave's Killer Bread, screaming, "Are you ready to rock?" People thought I was crazy, but I'm not, am I?
Oh, everybody knows you're crazy, Morgan, but that's okay. You're part of this show. But this Dave's Killer Bread, it is crazy good. Dave's Killer Bread is made with the highest quality organic and non-GMO ingredients. Did you know that?
Yes, I did. And I know, like the Power Rangers, it's power-packed with whole grains, fiber, protein, killer taste, and best of all, texture. So, folks, guess what? You can find it in your local grocery stores. Just visit daveskillerbread.com to learn more and look for Dave's Killer Bread in the bread aisle of your local grocery store.
And now let's get back to real crime fighting.
Hey, car shoppers! Car Gurus here with your word of the day. Strict. It's not a crowd favorite, but wouldn't it be nice if there was a car shopping site so strict it only said cars were great deals if they were actually great deals based on details like mileage and accident history? There is! Visit CarGurus.com and find a deal that's 100% certifiably great. Seriously. Don't make us say it twice.
Michelle Linhart went from sleeping at a Greyhound bus station because she couldn't afford a hotel room to becoming the first female agent ever appointed by the President of the United States to lead the DEA. Welcome to Game of Crimes. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 10, Game of Crimes. This is Morgan Wright, and I am literally here with my partner in crime,
Steve Murphy, and we are into double digits now. We hit the 10th episode. Look at us.
Which we're screwed now because Murph only has 2 hands. That's as high as he can go. So if we get to 11, we're screwed.
I got to take my socks off.
Which means we can only go to episode 19. Murph's missing his big toe. No, hey, guys. Hey, we want to thank you for everything that you're doing. It's really been fun to see the audience grow. It's been really fun to get your feedback and watch as we improve on things. So, guys, we just want to say thank you very much for this. And last episode, I'm telling you, El Chapo, I still got a sphincter factor of, 12.5, I think. That final shootout, all the rental cars that were just destroyed.
I love listening to that story. It just brings a sense of reality to what really goes on out there. And I want to just very quickly say thanks to our listeners, too, because, we get on here and
they're not listeners anymore. These are our friends. These are players. They're players in the Game of Crimes. They are now officially known as players.
Well, sweet. But thank you, guys. We couldn't do any of this without you. And as long as you encourage us, we're going to continue to bring you the best interviews we can find, things that mostly you're not going to hear anywhere else. So,
and you're going to get the detail. Absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of comments are going, I've never knew this kind of detail, even about stories. Everybody knows about El Chapo, but nobody knows the real story, right? So
true.
We've got some good stuff coming up. So anyway, folks, those Apple reviews, those 5 stars, they really do help. It's like the Magic Kingdom at Disney. We don't know how the magic works. We just know it works. So keep giving us 5 stars. We really, really appreciate it. Head on over to our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com, for everything. I'm throwing another surprise at Murph because I surprised him last time when I said, hey, look, we're going to launch Patreon.
What's going to happen today?
Hey, well, Sandy Salvato, our resident mafia person, she's saying, hey, where's the merch? Can we get some stickers? So guess what? We're going to work, Murph and I are going to get together. He's got some big news for you too here in a minute, but we're going to work together. We're going to figure out the merch thing. We wanted to do things in stages, get the podcast launched first, get Patreon launched, and then do merch. We want to make sure when we do something, we do it right.
Hey, we got some DEA narco stickers right now, but that doesn't do much for Game of Crimes, does it?
No, but you know what? We might use that book. We might use that book of yours as a grand prize giveaway.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. There you go.
So anyway, you guys head on over there. We also got our mailing list. That's a great place for us to also stay in contact with you outside of social media. We'll drop you some emails of stuff that's going on. And guess what? You have to get to patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We have now released quite a bit of content. We have a special. When this episode drops, Murph, guess what else is dropping on that Monday?
I don't know.
Episode 2 of You and Javier. when we
there
talk
you
about
go.
the realness. So, guys, we're surprising all of you Patreon fans that are out there, all of our players that are out there. Guess what? You're going to get an extra bonus episode this month. We're not going to wait a whole month to put it out there. So get over there. We've got some Q&A. We're currently voting on which movie Murph and I will subject to the narco meter. So or TV show. Could be any of those.
Yep. And if you're going to go listen to episode 2 on Patreon, bring a good comfy pillow because guaranteed to help you with insomnia.
Nah, folks, it's good. I'm telling you, this is details you will never see on Narcos on Netflix. You'll never hear about or read about in the book. So anyway, and the other thing too is if you just feel like supporting the show, head on over to paypal.com, use our email, gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com or paypal.me/gameofcrimes, whatever makes it easier for you to support the show and help us bring you fantabulous playa type content. And by the way, Murph, as we always say, this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad things doing bad people to good people. And guess what? If that's not your cup of tea and if that's not your bag, baby, shagadelic, that's okay because we take the story seriously.
But never ourselves.
Never, ever. Not once in our entire life have we ever taken ourselves seriously.
That's why we're so damn silly on the show.
That's right. Hey, but Murph.
Yes.
Before we get into Game of Crimes, guess what time it is?
Oh, I think it's Embarrassed Murph time. Something kind of, we got something like that called.
You got a worse rate. You are 0 for 90. So let's take them into Small Town Police Blotters. And boy, have I got a couple good ones for you today. Here's what's really fun. We've got a couple. One is a current small county deputy, and the other one retired from a small town, sent us a couple stories. So
that makes it even better because now you
this
guys
is
are
real.
calling in with your real stories too.
The dude wrote this report. So
Nice.
this comes from over Twitter from Deputy Brock Holmes of the Marquette County Sheriff's Office in Wisconsin. By the way, I did some checking in Wisconsin. The population of Marquette County, 15,075. Salute. All right, he's the listener. So here's the thing that he took. As a sheriff's deputy in rural Wisconsin, I love the small town police blotter. These are notes for some of my several favorite calls several years ago. A woman was crying hysterically when her dreadlocks wrapped around her foster parent's wings multiple times. He arrived and was able to remove the parrot and return the parrot back to its cage without injury to the parrot or any hair loss. He says it's small calls like this that allow you to look back and laugh at some of the outrageous things people call us for or need help with. Can you imagine responding to a call? Attention 1 Adam 12, woman with dreadlocks with parrot trapped in hair.
You're going to go dispatch repeat?
Yeah, say what?
No, let's think about this for a second. Let's don't scoot right through it. How the hell did a parrot get stuck in the woman's dreadlocks?
What was it attacking her? I mean, is it a vicious parrot? We need answers to this. Damn it, we need answers. All right. So,
Jeez.
Deputy Brock Holmes, Marquette County, Wisconsin. We need answers. How did this vicious attack happen? We want to know. All
Hey,
right.
brother, thank you very much too for sending that in to us.
And this next one comes from a buddy of mine. We've never met in person, but we've been involved in these police forums and stuff for a long time. Matthew Hawley, he's a retired cop from Bedford, New York. Like I said, we've known each other. So he sent this. I won't read the whole thing, but it came from a post from a sheriff's office. It had a picture of this guy that he looked like he belonged on a Facebook post.
Yeah, right.
It said, public notice, and this is from the sheriff of Putnam County in Florida. If you believe you were sold bad drugs, we are offering a free service to test them for you. Douglas Peter Kelly, 49 of Hawthorne, found himself in a situation where he thought somebody had sold him the wrong illegal narcotic. He contacted him, said he purchased meth about a week earlier and had a bad reaction, so he brought it in and had the deputies test it. And guess what, Murph? It tested positive for meth.
And he went to jail. What a moron. Good
He was
Lord.
walked to the jail and held on a $5,000 bond. The bond for possession of meth was $5. The bond for being felony stupid was $50,000.
Was it P.T. Barnum said, a new idiot's born every minute?
A sucker's
Holy
born
cow.
every minute. All right. Hey, this next one though, Murph, I got to read this to you. And by the way, I thought this was BS when I first read it, but I did my research. Here's the story. At 6:12 p.m. in the 4700 block of Portside Drive, Vermilion, a man put icy hot on his wife's vibrator. Divorce is pending.
Oh my gosh. Oh. Ladies, I'm sorry he read that to you, ladies.
And I thought this was total BS, but I did my research. Vermilion is a city in Erie and Lorain counties in the U.S., state of Ohio on Lake Erie, about 35 miles west of Cleveland. Its population was 10,594 at the 2010 census. This was in the Friday, May 25th, 2012 online, or the paper for the Sandusky Register. This is actually in the...
Oh, you know what? We're going to get some comments on this one.
No shit, divorce is pending.
Oh, my God. What? Oh, boy, that must have really been a nasty divorce to do that. Well, you know what, though? If she's using a vibrator to start with, that says something about the husband, doesn't it?
Oh, my God.
This is going downhill real quick.
Here's some more marital bliss coming at you here. No, not quite marital bliss, but happy couples. 5:47 p.m. Police responded to an Amherst site where a man and woman were hiking, and the woman became ill. So far, so good, right? Mm-hmm. Police determined that the woman was just trying to get out of a date set up using the WeChat app and feigned illness instead of being more forthcoming about why she wanted to end the hike.
Oh, my gosh.
And this makes a police report.
What was the report? What was the complaint when they called in?
Well, an ill woman, so she's faking being ill. So I guess wants an ambulance to get her out of this disaster of a date.
So I guess the EMS shows up and it's like, don't tell him. I just want to get out of this date. Act like I'm dying.
Yeah, and here's your bill for $500 for the ambulance.
Unbelievable. When all she had to do is say, honey, take me home. I'm done.
Yeah, I have a headache. Just fake a headache. Come on. Okay, here we go, Murph. Now it's time for What Year Was It?
Okay, here we go.
This is a good one.
None of these are good.
Oh, yes, it is. Not only do you have to tell me the year, you have to tell me which country.
Okay.
Here we go. Attempted wife murder at Greenfield, Holywell. So I won't read the whole story, but basically the gist is William Wood, age 53, a butcher, was indicted for that he feloniously did wound his wife, Elizabeth Wood, with intent in doing so then and thereby feloniously, willfully, and of his malice aforethought to kill and murder the said Elizabeth Wood at Greenfield near Holywell on the 28th of April last.
All right, I'm going to guess it's Scotland.
Wrong.
No? Really?
No. Let me read just a little bit more. Mr. Marshall, instructed by Mr. R.J. Williams, solicitor, Flint, prosecuted, and Mr. Colt Williams, instructed by Mr. G.E. Trevor Roper, solicitor, Mold, defended. The circumstances have already been reported in our columns. Anyway, so she was a widower with 2 kids. He was a widower with 2 kids, and they got together, and he tried to stab her. Oh, he stabbed her in the neck, tried to killing her. The judge sentenced him to 15 years, remarking that it was unfortunate he was not tried for murder. So you got the place wrong. It was actually Liverpool Mercury in the Merseyside, England paper.
I should have just said UK.
You've got to be more specific. I would just like Jeopardy. Can you be more specific? Okay, and so did it happen July 25th of 1884, July 25th of 1894, or July 25th of 1904?
Oh, let's go with 1894.
Wrong.
Damn, 84.
There, you got it. You got it on the second try this time. July 25th, 1884, in the Liverpool Mercury paper, Merseyside, England.
Well, and you know what? Scotland touches England, so it's the same thing. It's okay.
It's kind of the same things.
You know what? I'm going to hear about that one, too, because our friends in Scotland are going to go, we're not British.
Lad, you got your knickers in a twist there, did you, lad? Okay, so hey, guys. Well, hey, look, before we get into Game of Crimes, this is kind of a special episode for a couple reasons. And Murph, I'm going to let you take it from here.
What are we talking about?
Well, let's talk about your boss, your former boss, and introduce the episode, because while we were lighthearted, this kind of comes with some sad news.
It does. So today's guest is a person that I have the utmost respect for. It's an individual who came from a very small town. She's going to tell you the story and worked her way up through the ranks. I think you're going to be surprised because she made it all the way up to being presidentially appointed by both parties, Democratic and Republican. So she served under presidents from both parties to the administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration. So that's obviously a presidential appointed position. What she went through to get started in law enforcement and then worked her way up.
Wait till you hear the story about the oh my God, when she took a trip with her mom to test.
Yep.
We died laughing.
And it was, I would never, as long as I've known this lady, and we're talking about Michelle Linhart, As long as I've known her, I had no idea about all this. She is one of the most humble individuals I've ever met in my life, even as the administrator of DEA. And you got to understand that's the highest point that you're going to get within, in a law enforcement agency on the Fed side. So we had a great time with her interview. We were hoping to have a few other things on here from her, some photographs, and you'll understand what we're talking about after you listen to this interview. But her mom passed away recently. So, Michelle, our hearts and our prayers go out to you. This is nothing funny about that. I've been through it. I don't know if you have, Morgan.
Yeah, I have. I've lost both parents. And look, with Michelle, too, she makes it very clear that her mom, her mom was her best friend, and her mom was also her biggest fan. And you just could hear the love. I mean, just the admiration she had for her mom. And she was taking care of her in her home while we were doing this interview. And then we get ready to launch the episode, and we only find out. So while there's a lot of funny things in there, we obviously at the time her mom was still alive, but we want to extend seriously our heartfelt sympathies and condolences the best that we can, because this lady, when you hear her story, and for you women out there, if we love bringing stories about women who have held powerful positions. What she went through to become the head of an agency is nothing short of the frickin' American dream. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
Absolutely. And I just think you're going to love it. Michelle, we love you. We're sorry for what you're going through. We understand completely. But listeners, I think you're going to find this one of the most enjoyable.
They're not listeners anymore. They're players now. Players.
Well, I don't know. Players makes them sound like they're pimps or hookers or something like that. So...
All right. Well, let's do it, Murph. Are you ready to play the biggest game of all, the game of crimes?
Everyone get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. Bring on Michelle.
Hey, welcome back. This is going to be a fun one, don't you know? Because we've got some folks... I'm sorry, I can't. When we introduced her to you, for sure, she's originally from Minnesota, but she went on to become the big cheese at DEA. So, Steve, I think you should take this intro because I'm going to crack up.
I say this a lot about having old partners and old friends on the show here, but today is a true honor. All seriousness, all joking aside, it's my pleasure and Morgan's pleasure to welcome the former administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, a lady who worked her way up through the ranks. We're going to tell you all about her story here just in a little bit. But when she became the administrator, what made it different for her and made it different for us was she was one of us. She came up through the ranks. She paid her dues on the streets. She made cases. She put people in jail. She fought for her life on the streets of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michelle Linhart. Whoa!
Thank you. Thank you very much. I guess I need to say you betcha. I'm ready for today.
Yeah, oofta. Yeah. Oh no, we got to get into this because there are so many ways we can go. And people, people think when they see you in DC, it's like, oh, you're inside the Beltway type of thing and whatever, but they forget you came from the Midwest, eh? So,
Yep, you got it. White Bear Lake, Minnesota. I'm a Minnesota girl.
Which has a strong reference in the movie, as we were talking yesterday, Fargo.
No, you're talking about one of my favorite movies. Now, half the Minnesotans hate that movie because they say, we don't talk like that. And the other half love it. And I love it. Loved the character played by Frances. Loved Margie. And in that movie, if you remember, there's a little scene with two little hookers in a hotel room, and one of them says she's from White Bear Lake, and then says, "Go Bears." That was my high school. So, a lot in common with that movie.
Well, there's even more in common with that because we have done our intelligence work. We have dug deep. And Steve, what did we discover?
Well, I know that you were involved in sports and athletics as much as you could be, Michelle, while you were in high school. But what you didn't tell us is about your mascot. Who was in that bear costume?
Oh, how did you know about that? Wow.
We can't disclose sources and methods. Wow. You should know that by now.
Trained criminal investigators. You made us this way.
Well, I was my junior and senior year in high school. Most football games, I was the Bear mascot.
All
uh,
right.
and basketball every once in a while. But I was a true Bear fan, and I had a little pep squad as well, and we called ourselves the White Bear Rowdies, and we made all the games fun.
And we give you a hard time about this, but actually it's something to be proud of because you took the initiative there in high school. But I do have one other question. Were you selected as a mascot because of your height? Did that have anything to do with it?
That did not have anything to do with it.
Okay.
And what I tell people is, I did it once. Someone asked if I would do it. I did it. I loved it. And it was the warmest way to watch a football game in, October in Minnesota. The bear costume was, like wearing a big blanket. So it was and you were down on the field. It was a place to be.
And you probably got him free to all the games too, right?
Oh, that's part of it.
Well, they didn't know who was under the bear costume. So I make fun of Minnesota with love in my heart because my sister and brother-in-law and my two nieces and nephew we were talking yesterday from that area. Apple Valley, they went to Rosemont High School, go Irish. He plays football at Bethel. My oldest niece graduated from the U up there. My youngest niece is still going to the U. And we've been up there several times. So, it was, and you're right. We went to a couple of the football games up there when my nephew was playing. Bundle up, eh?
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, he's making fun of your accent. I'm not making fun of it because you can hear me. You've known me for 25 years. This is as good as my accent gets.
Oh, we were talking yesterday too, especially you get on a couple flights. I think, what did you say?
My
Delta
goodness.
was the one that used to carry a lot of Minnesotans?
I thought I lost my accent until I would, every time I'm on a Delta flight, especially one that goes through Minneapolis, half the plane is folks from Minnesota. And all of a sudden I hear the O's. Oh, don't you know? And I go, it's back. Or I'm around my brothers and sisters, and it just pops out.
Well, and every place has their jokes.
Yes.
Ollie and Lena, I think, were some of those from Minnesota. So we won't say some of those on the air. But hey, as we always do when we start off on these things, we always want to find out about you, because the real question is, how does somebody who is the White Bear Lake mascot, Go Bears, end up in law enforcement? I mean, where did you go to start that? Because I think part of it too is you actually interviewed one of the first female police officers there in White Bear Lake.
Yeah, I did an article when I was in high school on her, Carolyn Bailey. I knew even before then that I wanted to be a police officer, but it was almost impossible to try to read a book about a female police officer. So I actually went down and interviewed her and did a paper. But wanting to be a police officer went way back to grade school. And my mother reminded me that she got called in by the nuns. I went to Catholic school all the way to 10th grade, actually. But when I was in grade school, the nuns said, Michelle kind of marches to a different drummer. She draws purple Christmas trees, and she wants to be a police officer. Of course, if you knew my mother, you'd realize that she thought, "Oh my goodness, that's great." They were worried about it. My mother was like, "Go, Michelle." Yeah.
That's
so
my
I've had a
girl.
lot of people try to analyze, why I would have at a young age, I'm talking second, third, fourth grade, want to be a police officer. And they have analyzed that it must have been, was I a victim of crime? And, I've told the story before about the first time I did feel like I was a victim of crime is my little blue Huffy was stolen right from my front yard. And I just thought, I've got to find it. And so I started the Little Girls Investigations Club. I tacked
All right.
little signs on the trees and walked the streets of St. Paul and the alleys looking for my bike. And a few days later, I actually found it abandoned down an alley.
They were scared. They abandoned it because they didn't want the Little Girls Investigation Club to find the hardened criminals.
But there was, I've been asked, is there law enforcement in your family? I'm the very first one that ever went into law enforcement. And they say, well, did you have run-ins with the cops? Did you know the cops? No, at a young age, I didn't. I think it was because I was the oldest of 7 kids, and the youngest one was 8 years younger than me, and my mom and dad worked. So I was always in charge, and I was the enforcer.
You were the enforcer.
I
disciplinarian.
mediated more fights. I got scars. I can tell you.
which prepared you well for being DEA administrator.
But I always had this feeling, it was always about justice, I was always into, doing the right thing. And, I remember my mom told me the story about when I was in grade school, I had a birthday party and I never wanted to leave anybody out. And she said, well, go invite 4 or 5 friends over. So I did. I came home and she said, okay, who's coming over? And I invited every girl in my class. And she said, what?
Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
Michelle, what did you do? And I said, I didn't want to leave anybody out. I was always kind of into, there's rules and you do the right thing. And I was called the child in charge, later became the special agent in charge. But
In charge. But Jen, you were still managing a bunch of children, right?
Hey, and I was one
Like
of them.
Murphy. Yeah, that's right.
I'll be the first to tell you, I have not grown up. I'm in my. I won't tell you how far into my 60s I am, and I don't ever plan on.
Because you
growing
don't
up.
remember how far into
No,
your
don't-
60s you are. You
do
forget.
not change,
Oh, that's dementia.
Steve. You're always worth a laugh.
Thank you, Michelle.
Well, I thought you were going to talk about the reason you got into it is that were you a victim of crime? I thought making you eat lutefisk was a criminal act.
Oh my God, no, I would want to lock up the person that made me eat lutefisk. I can't stand the smell of it, and I've
Well, for the uninitiated
Oh my
out there,
God,
let
it's
people
some
know what
sort of
lutefisk is,
fish.
Michelle.
and. Some people think it's a delicacy, but if you walk into a house and someone has just prepared lutefisk, you'll run out the back door.
And for our friends in Norway, hey, this is we're not ditching you guys here.
We're not
Yeah,
but it's an
definitely.
acquired taste.
And I can still, I can still smell it right now, and it's putrid. Ugh.
Oh, well, we've ruined the podcast and we're going to have to start over again.
Another thing there, you mentioned the Huffy. So for our international listeners, can you tell us what that was? I know what it is, but
Well, it was just a little blue bike. We didn't really have a lot of money, so it was. I couldn't afford a Schwinn, but I had a little blue Huffy bicycle, and it had a little white basket on the front and these pink streamers, and that's how I rolled back then.
Did you have cards
yeah.
in your spokes?
Oh, yeah.
Did you have
You had
cards
to
in your
do that.
spokes? Oh,
You
of
had to
course.
do
Had to
that.
have those. You had to be cool. Had to fit in with the other kids.
you had to have that sound.
So that was your thing with high school. So what was your track then to get into law enforcement? So you went to community college first. What did you study there?
I was really a Nancy Drew fan. I read every Nancy Drew book when I was young. And so I always thought I wanted to be an investigator, a police officer. And every once in a while, I'd go off on another tangent and say, well, I want to be an architect. I want to be a shoe designer. But I always came back to wanting to be a police officer. Thank God I did. But my family didn't have a lot of money. Both my mom and my dad had to work, and I really didn't have enough money to go away to college, out of town and go to 4-year school. So there was a law enforcement class, a law enforcement degree you could get at a junior college in White Bear Lake. So I went to Lakewood Junior College, played sports. That's another reason I went there. Played
What's the mascot there?
the wood duck.
Oh,
I want to see you in that costume.
we
now.
went from Go Bears to Go Wood Duck.
And there actually was a wood duck costume. I did not wear it, but and I got my 2-year degree there. I took as many credits as possible because I didn't know that I would ever have enough money to finish a degree. So I would just take as many credits as possible. I worked while I went to college, and I had the best job in the world. I worked for a security company where we did all the ushering. We sat people at the Viking games, at the Twins games, every high school tournament. But my
Oh,
favorite
nice.
was we caught gate crashers at rock concerts. And oh my God, talk about an adrenaline rush. So I did that. That got me through my first 2 years of high school.
Wait a minute. Tell us a story about you running down you. Oh, let's not give away your height yet because it figures into this. So, but to say you weren't exceedingly tall, but you're running down probably drunk Minnesotans trying to crash the gates at rock
Oh my
concerts.
goodness,
You got to tell us
there
one.
were so many that anytime I think it was the Who.
Who?
The Who came to
Who?
the St.
I'm sorry.
All right,
Came
all
to
right.
St. Paul
We're gonna
one
mute you.
year, and that was my first experience doing gate crashing. And then Rod Stewart came to Minneapolis, and there were always huge crowds trying to get into these concerts. So we would, and I was usually, maybe there were a couple girls, but I would volunteer to do it. We'd put on these T-shirts. We'd go outside the venue and look for where people were, trying to get in, and then we'd walk the inside and look for the people that would stand by the door to let their buddies in. And sometimes, I loved it. Sometimes they'd try to rush the gates, and so we'd have to run after them, tackle them, and that was my first. In
All
high
right.
school, my guidance counselor didn't think I was college material, and I remember her saying, "Michelle, you should really find a job where you can do something with your hands." And I never knew what that meant, and I always wanted to get back to her and say, "I found a job where I could use my hands. I lock people up." Yeah.
And I made it through college.
And I get to take down gate crashers.
So you got to love people who want to limit
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
future for you, without giving you a shot.
So much for
Yeah.
being a guidance counselor,
Yeah. So you went from being Little Miss Goody Two Shoes in school to tackling these badass people at the gates. I like that. I never knew that about you.
But I was always Miss Goody Two Shoes. I just didn't like people breaking the rules. If other
There you go.
It was at the Catholic. Came from Catholic
Exactly.
school and Catholic training.
if other people had to pay to get in, you have to pay and you have to stand in line.
Right. Everybody should. That's right.
There you go. And that's what we did in DEA, didn't we? Stay in the line. You set your standards and you live up to them. So that's very admirable. At a very young age, you're doing that. That's great.
So you make it, you graduate junior college. How did you end up and this is one of my favorite places to say too, Bemidji, because Bemidji not only is it the home of Paul Bunyan and Babe, it's also got its own references in Fargo.
Well, I can tell you it was kind of a last minute decision. When I got my 2-year degree, I started looking, maybe going to the University of Minnesota. Actually had thought about going out of state, but I wasn't ready to leave Minnesota. I mean, I never thought I would leave Minnesota, actually. But I had a friend who went to Bemidji, and I went up there to visit him, and school just started. It was the first week of school. And I knew that they had a criminal justice degree there, and I went in to meet the instructors just to see, maybe next year I can go here. I sat down with it, and he was a former Chicago cop. His name is Don Bradle, and he told me about it was a pretty new degree up there, and they had just started a criminal justice club. And he told me all about this, and so I went home and told Mom and Dad, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know where we're going to get the money, but I have to go to Bemidji. I met a cop who's a professor who's going to teach me how to be a cop.
Cool.
It used to be a Chicago cop, not like there's nothing happening in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Chicago.
So it was also an area, you live in Minnesota in the summers, and we lived on a lake, but you still went away on vacation. You went up north. You went up north to one of the lakes, and my dad was very fond of fishing up near Bemidji. And so he was very happy to, pack my stuff up and drive me up there, so he could have a little fishing trip.
Yeah.
How far away was Bemidji from White Bear Lake?
It's funny because it seems like it was a day's trip. It was probably 5 hours, maybe 5 or 6. It seems so far. It's such a long drive when I think about it. But people will say, well, Bemidji. And by the way, the mascot for Bemidji is the Beavers, and I got a lot of razzing about that. But I loved the teacher. I loved the whole criminal justice club, and we just had such a good environment up there, and I decided, okay, I didn't have enough money. I walked into the school, the people that decide whether you can get a loan or not. People had already moved into their dorms. I didn't even know if I had a place to stay. I walked in and said, I really want to go here. Walked in with my mom, and the guy was basically saying, well, we don't have any scholarships. We don't have anything we can give you. So Mom said, take a walk. And I took a walk and I came back, and here they had paperwork for me to sign out. I had a job.
What
Oh my
was your
God.
mom part of the mafia or what? Take a
Wow.
walk. I'm going to take care of this guy.
I'm sure he persuaded him into something. He probably, this is my mom. He probably told her, you don't know, she's going to be a police officer someday. And probably talked his ear off, twisted his arm, and all of a sudden I had a student work job that was right up my alley. I took the statistics for the men's basketball team. So, oh my God, I got paid for that. I used to do that
Nice.
for free. Now I'm getting paid
Nice.
for it. So I moved in. We didn't have enough money for me to be on the meal plan. So I just put bologna and, put hot dogs and stuff out my window. That was my refrigerator during the winter. And I lived on
Wow.
popcorn and tomato soup. And took as many credits as I could because I never knew when the money was going to run out. And graduated. I was a year and a quarter up in Bemidji.
You wait a minute. You did your last 2 years
Yeah.
of college in a
Yeah.
year and a quarter? You overachiever,
I was just going to say the same thing.
But it was
you. Miss Goody Two-Shoes overachiever.
but
We
it
got a
was
new name
always
for you.
motivated by the money's going to run out. I have to do it.
So what were you taking,
think it
like
was
20 credit hours a semester and then summer school too?
I think not summer school, but I think it was 22 credits, and then I was able to. I had the greatest opportunity to take 2 internships, not one. I took 2 internships. One with the St. Paul Police Department during the summer of 1977, and then the winter of 1978. I was able to intern at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Investigation. So I got to see what it would be like to be a police officer, which was my dream. Maybe go into eventually investigations, which I learned from interning at the BCA, and it was perfect.
You know who the most famous detective from Minnesota is, don't you?
Oh, you mean what, Elliot Ness?
No, Lucas Davenport, John Sanford. My wife reads
Oh.
those novels all the time.
I have a lot of people ask me about that. Yeah, I haven't read that.
We're just getting started with your life here, and this is already one hell of a motivational
Holy cow.
story.
Put your,
Good
no
Lord.
refrigerator, so we stick our bologna and our hot dogs out on the ledge.
Wow, that's great. And hats off to
Yeah.
your mom. Go mom. Whatever she did.
Well, no, hats off to you, man. I remember going to college. I was in Kansas, went to Fort Hays State. By the way, my brother-in-law is the chaplain for the St. Paul Police Department now, the main chaplain. But no, I remember doing that too. Didn't, parents divorced and dad not in the picture at that point, and had to take out student loans. And I remember the meal plan was like one meal a day. So I learned early on when McDonald's had an all-you-could-eat, or Wendy's had the the buffet. I mean, you just loaded up and you didn't eat for 2 days because you were so stuffed walking out of there.
Yeah, thank God. Tomato soup, popcorn, and cereal. Thank goodness.
Ramen noodle. Survived on ramen noodle and mac and cheese. Man, so you did this in a year and a quarter. So what was your plan? You get done in a year and a quarter. You've got your degree in criminal justice. How many places do you start? I mean, go ahead. How many places did you start applying?
So I was ready to go. And I, was under the illusion that once you get that degree, I mean, you just go.
Doors just open up.
You
the
go
world's your
and
oyster.
you test, and of course, everybody's going to want you, right? But what wasn't prepared for was that there's very little turnover. My dream was I was going to be a St. Paul cop. There's very little turnover. Nobody retires. Nobody leaves. And so it's once in a blue moon that they have an academy and that they're actually hiring. Well, also in 1978, 1979, there were a lot of veterans coming home from the war, that wanted to go into law enforcement. And I could make some of the lists, but I was never up high enough.
You didn't get the veterans preference that they did.
No.
Right? I mean, in terms of points, they would elevate them above you in points, right?
And rightly so. Believe me, the veterans deserve everything.
I agree with you. Yeah.
But
you also had a second strike, too. How many females were applying for law enforcement at that time?
Not many. There was a big change, though, between 78 and 80. I could see a huge change. But I put all my eggs in one basket, which was a mistake. And I prepared to go, test for the St. Paul Police Department. Having just been in their academy as an intern, and that solidified it for me. I was going to be a street cop. There was no doubt. And I wanted to work for that department. But I went to take the test. And here I'm an athlete. And, I was in very good shape. There was no way I was not going to pass the physical. And I walk into this room, and the first thing you do is you go to this machine. And the only way I can explain it is kind of like, think of like handlebars on a bicycle. You grab the handlebar, and it's got this machine, and they say, okay, now push in. And I pushed in, and then they tell you when to stop, and then they give you a little rest, and then they tell you, okay, now push out. And I pushed out. They tell you when to stop. And apparently, the thing never moved. It was to measure my upper body strength. And I couldn't move it. I couldn't. There was a little dial, and you had to move it. I never saw it move once. So I thought, oh my God, I am in trouble. And then the second one was, here I could run with the guys. I could run with the boys. I was always a tomboy. You had to get over the wall. And I was not prepared for that. I didn't have the technique down. And I couldn't get you get up there, you try to run up the wall and try to get your butt over. I couldn't get it over. So I thought, oh my God, I have failed my life's dream. What the heck am I going to do? And I was rejected for that. So I said, oh my God, what's my backup? I had no backup. So a friend of mine who got into the police academy, said, "Why are your eggs in one basket, Michelle? Branch out. You don't have to stay here." I had never thought of leaving Minnesota, and I thought about it. I had a little pity party for a little while. I thought about waiting for 2-3 years until they had another test, but that wasn't going to work. So I said, that's it. Okay, I'm going out of state. And I applied for some of the jobs that opened up in the Twin Cities and tested, and in fact got on lists, but I was never high enough on the list to get called back. No one left those jobs.
Did you apply to Fargo? Because I heard there's a police chief opening in Fargo.
Yeah. Well, did not decide to go to Fargo. What I decided I wanted to do was get as much experience as possible. And you have to understand, growing up in White Bear Lake, going to the big city was taking a drive downtown St. Paul. And if you really went on an excursion and were brave enough, you actually drove into downtown Minneapolis. I mean, that's how kind of the sheltered life I lived. But I decided that's it. I went to Target. I bought a file cabinet. And then I went and bought a zip code book. A book that divided all the cities in the country up by zip codes and by population size. And I said, that's it. So I went down, I took the biggest cities, and I sent resumes to every city. And
how many?
Oh my God, probably about 50. And one by one,
wow.
And I got the file cabinet to prepare to file all these letters that I was going to get back to say, come and test with us, right?
I sense disappointment is in your future here.
And one of the first ones to come back was Los Angeles. And I imagined myself from the TV shows being, I could go to LA. And it came back, big red stamp, denied or whatever, rejected. And it was always because of my height. And I got one from Chicago, I got one from Miami, and they rejected me because they said you had to live within the city limits. So I was just getting frustrated.
What was the minimum height? You said you got rejected for height. What was the minimum height and what were you at?
Well, most of them were like 5'5", and there were a few that said 5'4". I was 5'3 3/4". So I just had to figure out what I could do to become 5'4" all of a sudden. Well, I got all these, about 50 letters back, almost all rejection. And one day, and this was a family affair. My family helped me go through these, file them, give me opinions on which city I should go to. And I saved my graduation money, so I had money to take probably one trip. I didn't know where I was going to stay or how I was going to live, but I could get someplace. I didn't even know how I could get back. And there was a flyer, and it was Baltimore City Police Department. Now, this is my sheltered life. I go, Baltimore. My backup baseball team was the Baltimore Orioles. So I think I might go to Baltimore. I opened the flyer, and here's this picture, and they got these great uniforms, and their hands, they got men and women, and their hands are kind of out in this like team. They got pigeons behind them. Their arms are extended. It was kind of like, come be on our team, and it grabbed me. I'm like, I'm going to Baltimore. So I said, what am I going to do? My dad gave me his brand new credit card and said, okay, I think we have enough money on this that you could stay one night. I flew to Baltimore. I thought that, okay, most of these tests, you get interviewed, then you come back a month later and you do the physical, and you come back a month later for another interview. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I figured I got to start somewhere. So I went to Baltimore, went in, got interviewed. I'm asking, when do I do the push-pull? I was always worried about the push-pull. And they're like, oh, we don't have physical requirements. And I thought, whoa, this is going to be easy. The hardest part for me was when I had to be 5'4". And now...
So, but before you get started on that, we need to put you under oath, because my understanding is, for one of the few times in your life, Miss Goody Two Shoes, you may have gamed the system here a little bit.
Fudged just a little.
Fudged it, yes.
Well, I thought this is do or die, right? So
not a denial yet. Not a denial.
I had, in the 70s, I wore a fro. I had a little afro that I styled in 76, 77, 78. Now I could pick that thing out, and it could give me another half inch.
You didn't say picked yesterday. You said poofed. I poofed it out.
Poofed it out. I figured your listeners wouldn't know what poof is. Maybe they know what pick is.
For you're Minnesota, you know what a poof. You know poofed. I poofed it out. Yeah.
You betcha.
You betcha.
So.
You guys.
So I did. I stood tall and I did poof that thing out, and I stood on that thing and I just held my breath, and I wasn't rejected. I was just waiting for rejection, but apparently I made it. So I only had my dad's card. I could only stay in the hotel one night. They asked me to stay one more day. I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I stayed at the Greyhound bus station overnight.
Wait a minute. You slept in the Greyhound bus station in Baltimore?
Downtown Baltimore.
How did you survive?
Yeah.
It was the best people watching ever. And I didn't sleep. And so I knew I was coming back the next day for some sort of other test. I came back and really it was just another interview. And then they said, when can you come? I said, well, when do you have an academy? Because I figured, maybe once every year or two. And they said, we have academy starting every month. So, it was meant to be. I did get back home, packed up my stuff. My mom drove me out. We put everything I owned, which was a waterbed, my stereo, and my albums, and my bike.
Of course, it's the 70s. It has to be a waterbed.
It was.
and your Bee Gee albums and Donna Summers. And
your Huffy bike.
Well, Huffy was long gone by then, but we drove out to Baltimore. I had no place to stay. I didn't know anybody. I just knew that this was it. I'm going to be a cop.
Now, was this a live-in academy? You had to spend the night there or no?
No, I had to find a place to live, which is a whole other thing. We pull into the outskirts of Baltimore, and it was me, my mom, and a girlfriend went with me. And we wondered, well, why don't we just spend the night here? It looked like a cheap hotel. We didn't think anything of it.
Wasn't Morgan's. Was that Morgan's No-Tell Motel you were staying at?
My mom goes in. She says, stay with the trailer.
I just can't imagine all the people hanging around this cheap hotel that's rented by the hour. Was it a by the hour hotel?
She comes back out. She comes back out and she says, well, it's cheap. It's by the hour. And
okay.
And so they say we could just park the trailer right here, but they're gonna give us a room so that we can keep an eye on the trailer all night.
Yeah.
So my mom coined it. She always talks about, remember when we stayed in the Hot Pillows joint in Baltimore?
Oh, I got to tell you, I haven't laughed this hard on a podcast. We haven't even got to the good stuff yet. This has been the most interesting backstory I think we've had.
Well, I got to know, did you spend the night there?
We spent the night, but we took turns looking at that trailer. God forbid I lose my waterbed and my bike and my albums. My goodness.
Oh,
but
so you survived your first night.
I survived it, and it was such a good experience. That is when I learned about DEA. It was actually in the academy. And had it not been for Special Agent Calvin McFarland, who was out of the Baltimore office, he came and talked to our police academy. And I had never thought I'd have anything to do with narcotic enforcement or drugs. No interest. I just wanted to be in a patrol car. But he told us all about DEA. That was my first exposure to the Drug Enforcement Administration. He made...
Was it called DEA at that time? I heard they renamed from the BNDD, Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs.
It was DEA at the time. We were, 73 was when DEA became DEA.
Changed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was in the first 5 years. It was 1979. And he told us about what they do and gave us a drug ID class and all that. That was my first exposure to the DEA. And that would come into play later because...
you're going to get... We're going to talk about that in a second, but let's go back, talk about the academy. So you show up. Tell us about that first day at the academy. What was it like being from White Bear Lake, go Bears, being with the Bemidji Wood Duck, and now you are in this is got to be like an alien planet being in Baltimore.
I it was different. Let's put it that way. And just trying to maneuver a big city like that. And it was during the remember when we had they rationed the gas and we had gas lines. My first week, I had a little Mustang, and first week, because I didn't have any money. I was on empty on my way to the academy, and I had to pull over on a street. I didn't have time to wait in the gas line, jump a city bus, and get to the academy. And everything was new to me, and they started calling me Alice. And I thought it was derogatory at first, but it was because I always said, I'm in Wonderland. I said, I don't know what this is. I didn't even know what a lottery ticket was.
See, you had never heard of a lottery ticket before that?
No. Bingo at the VFW, but I didn't know what
no, we won.
I didn't know about a lottery ticket and little things. It was just everything was great to me. I mean, it was new.
Yeah.
It was new.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with the law enforcement culture, everybody gets a nickname. Gets a nickname.
So how long was your academy?
I think it was, we started in July and we graduated in November. And it was the summer of 1979. And the academy... Which
I was a freshman in college at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, young whippersnapper.
And it was everything that I wanted it to be. I mean, I learned everything. We had a lot of women start out in my academy class. And my roommate, my best friend in the academy, she years later came to DEA as well, and she's one of the best. Kathy Kelleher, she's one of the best DEA agents I know. But
wow.
we just had a great summer, and then my mom and dad came out and saw me graduate in November, and first time they had ever been on the East Coast.
Where did you, this is another thing I think you failed to tell us when we had our pre-call. Where did you graduate in your class?
Well, I was outstanding student
in
the police academy, and so I got to pick my first place to work in Baltimore, and I picked Northwest Baltimore.
Why?
And it wasn't far from where I was living, and it also had. It wasn't West Baltimore. That was probably the roughest, but it had parts of that. And when I look back, I mean, all of Baltimore was rough, right?
Mm-hmm. That was a tough town.
But I heard good things about the Northwest District, and so I picked the Northwest, and I started up there. And loved it. I mean, you rode around with people for about a week, and then you were in your own squad. I had my own, in Baltimore they call them posts, and I had my own 615 was the post, and that was the start of my dream job.
So you're on patrol and you're answering radio calls. That was your responsibilities at that point?
Yep. Exactly. And, Baltimore was so crime infested that our posts were not very big. I mean, I could get out of my squad car and probably run my whole post. But I had on my post, I had a hospital, I had a shopping mall, I had a big park, and then I had a residential area, and it was busy. The Northwest District is, like I said, it was crime infested, which to me was great. Because you would learn. And I quickly learned that every crime that's committed has something to do with drugs. And every call I had, whether it was a domestic or whether, you had to arrest somebody because they stole something, fights, no matter what, it came down to drugs.
So do you remember the first time you got to go light and siren in a police car?
Well, this is the thing about Baltimore. We didn't even have sirens because sirens in Baltimore, we had blue lights too instead of the red lights.
Yeah.
We had blue lights. This is amazing to me. Where's the lights and siren? Well, there are no sirens in Baltimore. The cars don't have sirens. You'd have sirens going off 24/7. Yeah.
Wow.
So you didn't have them. You just would throw that blue light on and go.
Oh my! So I never knew that. I mean, I've been around law enforcement. I never knew that.
Yeah.
No sirens in Baltimore. Well, that stands to reason. Is that people would be pissed off? They'd be up all night long. Here comes a siren again.
Yeah.
And
so what was the first major call you remember going on? The first really, I mean, not just the shoplifting, but the first like shooting or robbery or homicide or something like that.
Well, the first serious one to me was actually a dead body, and a dead body. I didn't know. It was a call.
Had you ever seen a dead body prior to this?
No, it was a call for dead body, and I responded. And there was no. I was first one there, and I was let in by a landlord. And it was a guy up in a little. He had his own room in this tenement house, and I wasn't sure what it was, and it ended up being it was a suicide.
How long had you been there?
Quite a while, and the reason the landlord called was the neighbors were complaining about the stink.
About the smell.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's when I learned what a stinker was. We used to call them stinkers. And I learned that what you had to do is when you got home, you had to put your uniform.
Wash your clothes.
You had to wash them. And then after you wash them, you actually have to put them in the freezer. Wrap them in newspaper, put in the freezer. I learned all these ways to get rid of that smell.
And that's the bad. When I went to a couple autopsies, I learned a lesson really quick too. Is that you take the mentholatum or other stuff, you put it below your nose and put the mask on it because I was a wuss on that kind of stuff. But
oh, it's horrible. There's nothing being a wuss about that. The smell is just one of a kind.
I don't know how the forensic pathologists and the lab techs do that because they would just do that, day after day. But so you go. So
we had a lot of guys that would carry cigars in their briefcase, and they'd fire up a cigar to help everybody out.
Well, Murphy's body odor used to just basically wipe out all the other smells. So the West Virginia kids saw a shower once a week.
I'm going to get a mute button on here, and I'm going to mute you when you're talking.
Remember, I run the show. I have the mute. I have the control over everything. So Michelle, so that's like your first call. So how long? So you talked about gaming the system. You cheated to get your way in, Mrs. Goody Two Shoes. You poofed your hair. Now you're working the streets. How long are you working the streets before you run into your raison d'etre, your reason for joining DEA? Because I thought that was a funny story. Tell us about that.
Well, I wasn't on the streets that long. It seems like it was like a whole career on the streets of Baltimore because there was so much going on, and I had friends that became police officers in Minnesota and other places, and I would tell them about, our normal calls, especially if you worked like 4 to 12 and it was a weekend, you didn't do anything but answer felony calls. I mean, there was none of this I
Barking
think,
dog,
yeah.
parking
Or chasing
complaints.
speeders.
Someone stole my TV. I mean, you didn't do anything like that. It was
Yeah, you call
it
the
was all-
911 center, say somebody took my bike, they fall off their chair laughing. You kidding me? Get out of here.
It was all felony calls. But it was very, very quick. I started to meet DEA people because DEA agents and Baltimore City task force officers that worked with DEA would show up all the time on my post to do search warrants. They would find out when I was working. I'd say, oh, I'm on the midnight shift. And so about 5 a.m, they would say, okay, come on out. We're going to do a raid. And I thought of Calvin McFarland, who was the first person I met from DEA, and how much he loved his job. And then I saw firsthand, I would be called to the residence. I would be the uniform presence so that they knew someone wasn't breaking in. I was in full uniform. And just talking to the DEA guys, and they loved their job. Heck, they got to wear jeans and drive fancy cars, and and they were always locking up, the drug dealers, the people, slinging poison on the street. I just thought that's really interesting. I need to look into that. And I wasn't on patrol very long until it clicked that okay, all this crime, all these family breakups, everything comes back to drug abuse. And how can I make the biggest impact? And it was really, well, maybe I want to investigate drug dealers and take drugs off the street. Maybe I do want to look into DEA. I was kind of on the fence. Didn't know if I was ready to make that move or not. Things were still pretty new to me, and I was learning.
But it took one guy to get you over the edge. It took one guy.
One incident to get me over the edge.
This is classic too, because I've never heard this before. So tell us about your little encounter with the dude who propelled you on this DEA career.
So, I was toying with it for, I would say, a couple months about whether I should, if it was time for me to look into maybe going to DEA. I just hadn't made my mind up. I pulled in after working a shift, pulled in to a gas station.
Hey, now just a quick break from our exciting crime stories to tell you about how I'm crushing Steve by playing Best Fiends. He's going to try and tell you he's on level 302. He's not. He's level 159. I am at level 289, and I'm crushing it like Arnold.
I don't know where you came up with that 302. I think you're just jealous. But you know what? Here's the thing. This game, Best Fiends, it's become somewhat of a little bit of an obsession with me. I love playing it. When you got some downtime, when you've been working your butt off all day, getting these podcasts ready and doing your research and doing interviews.
Well, that wouldn't be you.
Well, I have good friends. But it's a great game to pick up, and the coolest thing about it, you can play it even when you don't have Wi-Fi, which means you're not using up your data.
And you know what, Steve? I use that exactly that way. We just came back from vacation in Cancun. And so what we have to do, we have to sit in the airport. We have to sit on the airplane. We have to sit in Immigration and Customs. And while everybody's sweating and complaining, I'm crushing it like Arnold, like Terminator. Nothing is standing in my way.
Well, I will say, last time we did this, I think I was fighting to get to level 50, and I'm up to level 159 now, so I'm catching up to you, big boy.
You look good in my rearview mirror. That's all I can say. And you know what else I can say about this, Steve? I can tell you, download the 5-star rated puzzle game Best Fiends free today on the App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends.
And now let's get back to some crime fighting.
Hey folks, just a quick break from our show to tell you about our new sponsor. And Steve and I are both excited about this new sponsor. It's BetterHelp. That's better, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com. Now, what do they do? Look, think about this. Is there something preventing you from getting to your goals? What interferes with your happiness? COVID has just wreaked havoc on this world as we know it. Things have changed so much. BetterHelp will do things like assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. And Steve, what I like most of all,
because a lot of people can't travel and they can't go places, and there's this stigma with going to a physical location, it's safe in a private online environment. In fact, you can start in just 48 hours.
Absolutely. And please don't think of this as a crisis line, or it's not a self-help line. What this is, though, is professional counseling done securely, all online. You know, and you think back to when we had to go to counseling sessions, you had to go in the waiting room with other people.
Yeah.
And they're all looking at you like, why are you here? You don't look like you need help. And I'm probably thinking the same about them. And you just don't like to be judged like this. So with the convenience of online counseling, it's convenient. If you don't like your counselor, you can easily and free of charge ask for a different counselor. Everything is just there for you. It's available 24/7 from anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and look, it doesn't matter what the issue you're dealing with. Is it depression? Is it stress? Is it anxiety, sleeping, anger, family conflicts? Who would have thought, Steve, a year and a half ago, we would be talking about quarantining in your own home, not going places. So people are struggling to figure out, how do I deal with this? What do I do? Relationships, sleeping, trauma, things that we never thought about dealing with, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And it's not just COVID, folks. It's just the way society is today. There's no stigma in getting help. The best thing in the world is to get help. It's convenient, it's professional, and it's affordable. And if you don't believe us, go check out their site. There's daily testimonials that they post on this site. In fact, Steve, this is so popular. People using BetterHelp, they're recruiting now additional counselors in all 50 states.
It's incredible. And you know what? As one of our listeners, you'll get a 10% discount on your first month by visiting our sponsor's website at BetterHelp.com/Game of Crimes.
Do what Steve and I did. Join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Game of Crimes.
And now let's get back to some more great crime fighting. No one should settle when it comes to taking care of their health and wellness. And with Everlywell, you don't have to. Everlywell makes lab testing easy and offers over 30-plus at-home lab tests, from food sensitivity, thyroid, metabolism, and testosterone, to men's health, women's health, and more. Each Everlywell test is shipped to your door and comes with easy-to-follow instructions so you can collect your sample from home on your own time. Once you send your sample back using Everlywell's free shipping, it's processed in a certified lab. Your results are reviewed by a board-certified physician, then they're sent directly to you digitally. You can even share them with your healthcare provider. Your results are personalized and easy to understand, so you know exactly what they mean for you. Learn more at everlywell.com and demand better for your body. That's everlywell.com.
I was still in full uniform, had my personal car and filled up with gas. I had a jacket or a sweater on, but I'm filling up for gas, and this guy pulls up and approaches me, and he wants to sell me weed.
You're in uniform with just a jacket on. It's like you got the gun hanging out. You got the other stuff, right?
The whole thing. I'm a Baltimore City police officer, and at first you start looking for the cameras. Am I on candid camera?
Is this a setup? Is this a setup?
Yeah, but he was the real deal, and I couldn't believe it. And he hands me a business card, and it says, "A friend with weed is a friend indeed."
What did he have did they have pagers at that time, or how were you supposed to get a hold of him?
This is way before pagers. So
okay.
This is a business card with the phone number, which I ended up turning over to the detectives that worked. You didn't make a
hand-to-hand buy that night and take the guy down?
No, I was sure that there's something wrong with this. But
that guy was a real entrepreneur, wasn't he? Holy cow!
Yeah.
His own business cards.
Yeah. But that was it. So then driving home that night, I said, that's it. I'm going to check this out. And I never looked back. It was the best decision ever.
What was the process you went through from there? How did you end up applying and getting accepted at DEA after that?
So the guys from DEA that I knew, told me, just make an appointment to go down and see the guy handling recruitment. And went down, filled the paperwork out. I knew that they were always worried about having these hiring freezes, because I would hear about that, and they said, "Get your paperwork in right now. We think there's going to be a hiring freeze." So that sped me up with the paperwork. And a few
What
months
year,
later,
what year was this, Michelle?
1980.
So you'd only been on Baltimore City 2 years before you applied.
Just under 2 years is when I applied. And then I got a call from an agent who later I ended up working with, Gene Crosby from Minneapolis. And he was doing my background investigation. And
the Minnesota Mafia gets involved now to make sure you get a job. Oh, we got this. Yeah.
He called and he said, we're rushing it through because they want to get you in the academy. And I said, well, when's the academy? And he said, January. Well, that's only a few months away. So, long story short, I hired on with DEA December 28th, 1980. The first week of January, I was in the academy.
And where was that?
That was Baltimore City, in Washington, D.C., and it was the last class that went through the DEA headquarters on 14th and I.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it was BA class 17. And there were a handful of us that were from Baltimore that were in the class. But I hired on, and the rest is history.
Oh, we won't talk about that history.
Yeah, and so folks may wonder why we're spending a little bit more time. Well, first of all, we've talked to one other female police officer. Pam Barnum was an OPP undercover officer, and her story was interesting too. But, the thing is, during your time too, Michelle, I went through the Police Academy in 82 and the State Patrol Academy in 84. But when I went through in 84, Jackie Railton was female in our class, one of only the third female hired in the 50 years at that point of the Highway Patrol. I remember the other two, Suzanne Evinger and Jan Lamb. And so it was like, it was not that it was different for guy cops, to see a female in uniform, but I'll tell you what, it was really strange is when you're out there and, most of these folks weren't used to, especially in these areas that were all male dominated, never seen a female cop before, had never seen, you show up and they look at you and they go, I remember this too going, you're a trooper? And it's like, got the badge, the uniform. Maybe that gave it away there, Skippy. I mean, you're smart, nothing gets by you. But how was it when you started in Baltimore? Let me the reason I'm saying we want to spend a little time, because we want people to understand what you went through to get to where you were. It wasn't easy. But when you were in Baltimore, how were you treated? And just be candid. I mean, it's like, I can tell you there were guys that I used to work with, because I grew up, like I said, with just my mom and two sisters. I was always sensitized to being around women. And I know there were some guys who just, I don't want to skirt around here. We don't need this. What kind of crap did you have to put up with initially?
Well, I knew that there would be skeptics, because I always got that, how are you going to chase a guy down the street and catch him? And how are you going to do this and that? It was always about, I was slender, petite, thin. It was always about that. So I knew going into it, just like in the academy, I just had to show that I could do the job. It was rough at first. I had a sergeant who, to this day, I love. I'm actually now very glad that he was so hard on me. He would tell me once a week, he would call me, to pull over on a certain street and meet him. And he'd pull up and he'd say, it's my job to make sure that you don't stay on this job. You weren't meant to be on this job. He would give me that kind of
What is this, reverse motivation speech or what?
He would give me that feedback. Oh. And this went on and on for at least the first month. I think it was a test. Well, I wasn't going to go anywhere. And I got to tell you, I had men on that police department that worked with me on my shift that trusted me right from the start. And I had some that didn't. And I knew right away something was going on, because my name, instead of Michelle, my name became Mike. I was called Mike, and I wasn't really sure what that was all about. I later find out that they couldn't go home and tell their wives that they were working with a female on the shift. So they would go home and say, oh, I had a call with Mike. or, Mike and I arrested, that's how I became Mike. And my sergeant, again, he would say, well, we need to get you in a fight. He was like finding fights for me to be, and he thought that would be what would make me quit. But I was never going to quit. I worked too hard to get here. I was going to do whatever it took.
My God, you ate hot dogs and bologna and stuff out on your ledge. You're not quitting now.
I'm not quitting. I'm not going anywhere. And I give it to those guys that really took a leap of faith. And they just, even the ones that were skeptical and that I could tell the little snide comments, I could tell they weren't with it, didn't believe that a woman belonged on the job. But I wasn't the first female in that district. There was a female officer that came before me, and she did a good job. So I thank her, because I think that did help. But it was a rough first maybe 3 or 4 months. And I remember I wasn't invited to some of the shift change parties because I was Mike, and they hadn't really spilled the beans about, that they're working with a woman. So I started to see that change, and then I was invited to parties, and the beans were spilled, and then the wives told me how when they suspected something, the guys would come home and talk about Mike.
They talked a little too fondly about Mike,
They suspected something, and a couple of them admitted that they went out and bought police scanners, and that's how they found out I was a woman.
Really?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, the Little Girls Investigation Club comes to Baltimore.
Well, now, didn't your nickname of Mike change to something different?
Oh yeah. So I get there in the Northwest District, and I was Mike. And one of the things I learned is that I loved getting out of my car, and I loved, there were these old men that would stand outside of this liquor store all the time. I mean, they were on the street morning, noon, night, always. And I would just get out of the car and go and talk to them. I got to know everybody by just talking to them, and especially the young people. I played basketball in college. I would shoot hoops with the kids playing on the playground, and pretty soon, all of those kids and all those young adults, they turned into the best snitches that you could ever imagine. Something would happen on my post, I guarantee you, I'd be flagged down a little bit later by one of the kids, and they would tell me who just burglarized the whatever. Uh-huh. And so they called me Mike as well. And they would always talk about, the little girl. I was the little girl cop. And so Mike, all of a sudden, by the time I left, Mike had turned into Mikey the Mighty Midget. And I would ask the guys, they'd be sitting there rolling their dice and everything, and they'd be talking to me, and they'd say, "We heard you did this and that." They would tell me stories like, "I heard you threw this guy out a second-story window and arrested him, and I heard you did this," and I'd be like, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Well, I know for a fact because I watched Narcos. Murphy threw somebody out of the helicopter, didn't you, Murph?
Yeah, well, when those opportunities present themselves.
Yeah. So, I went from being Mike to Mikey the Mighty Midget. And
how did the wives treat you after everybody found out and they started working with you? Did they view you as a threat to begin with, or did they come around to being one of the gang?
They were very skeptical at first, but then I was invited to the parties, and I think they could see that I just wanted to be a good cop.
Yeah.
And I had such a good lieutenant, and his name was Christensen, and he was from Minnesota.
Oh, there we go. The mafia strikes again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just loved him. And there was another sergeant, Irv Fry, who's no longer with us, and they were just great to learn from. And it was really hard when I told them that I was leaving. But, I did have my first fight. And my sergeant, who always told me that he had to talk me out of being on the job, he wasn't there for it. He spent weeks telling me how, I needed to be in a fight so I could see if I could really do the job. And the night I was really in a fight, he wasn't there. He was off that day. And so he, told me he was pretty proud of me. And I knew that I turned the corner with him.
Yeah.
And to the point where when I left, I mean, he was in tears. So Baltimore, which could have been disastrous, Baltimore ended up being one of the best experiences of my life.
Yeah, but
and brought me to DEA.
You made it. You had a lot to do with making it that way. I mean, you get the credit for that because you hung in there. And here's a female coming into a traditionally male-dominated career occupation. You're out there where you actually got your life on the line. Every agency, DEA was my third agency. Every agency I worked with, you had to prove yourself to the other people there, that you could earn their respect and their trust. And you hung in there and did that at 5'3" and 3/4 inches.
But poofed it out, it became 5'4", So
there you go.
But I used to tell you, I will tell you, there were a couple times I used to measure the way I would say whether I wanted to work with you or not is, if I was getting my ass kicked, did you hop in the fight and get your ass kicked with me? Did you jump in? And I will tell you, there were, I won't mention who they are and what agency, but there were a couple times there were guys that just kind of hung around. And I'm like, get in the game here, fellas. And it took a female officer showing up and just, I will tell you, it's just, I didn't care. I didn't care about you, sex, race, whatever. All I cared about, if you were blue, you had a badge. If you got in the fight with me, I would do the same thing for you. And that's like you say, that's the measure of respect, is that you're willing to do everything that it takes. And that's exactly what you did. I mean, even the... I tell you what, guy. I tell you, you were doing community policing before people knew really, I think, what community policing was.
Right.
And it was just that. So did Miss Goody Two Shoes, did you drink in college before you got to Baltimore, or when did you start drinking?
You know what? I dropped my girlfriends that smoke cigarettes. I would say, if you're going to hang around with me, you're not going to smoke. And I was in college when I had my first sip of alcohol, and I really didn't drink until after, until I was older. And to this day, I really still don't drink. And the joke was, I was a partier. I went to parties. I was the dancer, the 70s music, the whole thing. And people would say, but you don't drink. And I would always say, but I have my 7-Up. It was just, I just didn't want to not be in control of myself, and I just didn't, I was happy without it. I still don't understand, what good does any of that do?
Right. Yeah, and
isn't life great without it?
You felt a whole lot better the next morning than everybody else also.
I was one in high school who had to go around and drop my friends off when they were puking because they went to Wisconsin to have a few beers.
See, there's another. We won't even get into the cheeseheads in Wisconsin. There's a whole other group of. Hey, well, look, real quickly, tell us about the academy. When you went there, how many, if you remember, how many people in the class? How many were female?
I think that we started with about 40 in the class, and I think there was supposed to be 8 women in our DEA class. I think 6 showed up, and by the end of it, only 4 of us graduated.
What was the reason, that they dropped out, or what was the reason other people would drop out? Would it be grades or shooting or physical fitness? Or
Steve will relate to this. This is what happens at DEA. You're in the academy. You go to lunch. You come back. And all of a sudden, someone's nameplate is gone, and the desks, you're in a different seat, you're moved over, someone has been kicked out, and that happened to a couple of the women. I would say it was more, if you looked at it, not everybody had police experience. I was so glad that I had that experience, but I really think that they probably weren't. It wasn't the job they thought that they were signing up for. So
What they thought it was going to be
Yeah.
and what it ended up being were two different
Yeah.
things.
yeah,
You know, we had a guy start our academy, Michelle, and I was in BA 53, so I came on in 87 with DEA, and this guy, big, tall, strapping, good-looking guy, real muscular, extremely intelligent. He was a chemist from education, you know, and of course everybody's asking, a chemist, what the heck are you doing here as a cop? He lasted about 2 weeks, and then same thing. We come to class after lunch one day, and he's gone. And you get back to the dorm, and his clothes are gone. It's like, what happened to I can't even remember his name now. He did not know that we actually carried weapons as DEA agents and might be called on to use them. It's like, dude, you're so smart. And he was acing the test, the PT. He was going to be the number one guy in the PT. I mean, he was just squared away, but had not a clue what being a DEA agent was.
Well, that just shows you he wasn't going to be a good investigator if you can't spot the obvious there.
Oh, my
you know?
gosh.
Oh, so how long was your academy?
I think 16 weeks at the time.
What's the best part about the academy you liked?
Oh my God, I loved everything about the academy. I was one sad when the academy was over because I loved
Really?
the
You
academy.
are a different kind of person.
I am. What I loved was it was taught. Every class was taught by a DEA agent who had been out in the street and had done the job. And there were some characters, and you know, I just knew as we got through the academy and I met more and more of them, like John and Draco and all these, you know, icons within DEA. When you look over our history, I got so more relaxed about what the job was about by hearing their real life experiences. And you know, I think very fondly of them. And you know, the physical fitness part, that was hard. That's, you know, pushing you, and you know, it took me forever to be able to do, you know, my push-ups and all that.
Did they have the push in and pull out?
No, they didn't. I never saw that. I never saw that machine again. Thank goodness.
I've never even heard of that machine.
Oh my God, neither have I.
I never saw that again. But I just loved DEA. I loved the mission. I mean, if you just kept your eye on the wonderful things that you were going to be able to do for your community, for your country, you know, it was just, I was blessed with this job, and every day I loved it. And at graduation, I got my badge from Peter Benzinger, one of my favorite DEA administrators. And I never thought that I would someday be Peter Benzinger. I would someday be the administrator. But he, the night before graduation, he met my mom. My mom is my best friend, if you can't tell. He met my mom, and he told her...
Of course, any mom who stays with you in a hotel that's a by the hour has got to be a good friend.
She's a tough lady. Tough lady there.
But he told her, your daughter is going places. And my mom always remembered that, always thought of him fondly. And to this day, he always tells me that story about telling that to my mom. But
nice.
But at graduation, I never thought I was going to be anything but just a good agent.
Work the street. So how did you go about, because we've talked with Steve and Javier when I did a whole series of episodes with them. We've talked to a couple other DEA agents. How did you go about finding out your first post? You know, where were you going to go for the first time? Did you get to pick? Was it a surprise? How did it work back in your class?
Okay, back in the day, it's probably a little bit different than when Steve went through, but since we were going to be the last academy that they had for a while, and little did we know, but the works were in that we might be merging with the FBI. I found that
sacre bleu.
After.
Certainly such a tragedy shall not ever happen.
Yeah, I found that after that a lot of things were done thinking that might be the case. but you had a couple choices. So in the academy, I don't know, in week 6 maybe or something, they tell you, here's what you can put in for. Here are the offices open. In my class, you either got to put Washington, New York, Miami, or Los Angeles. That was pretty much it. And you were going to one of those. And in fact, they told our class that the majority would be going to Miami because this was the start of the, cocaine cowboys. And, this is back when coke is starting to flood South Florida.
Well, we did a whole interview with George Young, and that's exactly what we talked about when he started getting involved in trafficking the cocaine, in the early 80s and stuff, and everything coming into Miami. Yeah, that started to be quite the heyday.
So, the list came, so there were only those choices. So what do? I had already experienced Baltimore, and I didn't want to stay in Washington, D.C. Everything was happening in Florida. So it was a no-brainer. I put Miami was my number one choice. And I don't remember what the others, it was probably Miami, New York, D.C. I didn't put L.A. down. I never thought I wanted to,
Well, especially after they disrespected you and not accepted your application. The heck with them.
But so I thought I was going to Miami. And when they do this ritual where they, you're there and they tell you, you're sitting there just dying to find out where you're going. And then they read your name and where you're going. And I was going to Miami, and they say my hair poofed automatically. Everybody knew that I was so happy that I was going to Miami.
You were going to be 5'5" in Miami, weren't you?
I was going to Miami, and I didn't know where I was going to live. I just knew I was going to do great cases.
Well, the nice thing about moving to Miami, it's much warmer down there. If you had to sleep in the bus station, you wouldn't have needed a blanket. So.
Yeah, so most of the class, New York, between New York and Miami, a few went to LA. And I was satisfied with it until graduation day.
Yeah, so now here's something else you failed to tell us during the pre-call.
Yes.
What happened on graduation day?
So graduation day, it was always, if you're first in your class, you get to pick where you want to go. And I was happy with Miami. There were so many good agents in my academy class that I wouldn't even think that I was going to be, the top. But so at graduation, they announced, and there were 2 of us. We split it. Larry Sprout, one of the best agents DEA has ever hired, and myself were named the outstanding students. So we got to pick our duty post. So I remember my class counselor coming up to me, class advisor coming up to me, and he said, "But you're still, congratulations on that, Michelle, but you're still going to Miami, right?" Because they knew how excited I was. And I looked at him, I said, "Well, I think I'm going to Minneapolis." And he was pissed. He was like, "What?" Really? And I said, "Sometimes it's better to be a big fish in a little pool." Or something like that. Big fish in a little school. And because Minneapolis was a small office, and compared to Miami where all the action was. And I just thought that might be my only chance in life to go back and clean up, Minnesota, take drugs off the street, help kids in Minnesota. So I picked Minnesota and never regretted it. Got to go there as my first post.
Did you ever go work with St. Paul PD so you could show them that damn push-pull didn't matter?
Oh, let me tell you, I worked with some of the best officers from St. Paul, that worked with us in our task force. And and then it didn't even bother me that I wasn't a St. Paul cop because I had cred. I had been a Baltimore cop, And
well, you had seen more felonies in one night than some guys might see for 6 months,
absolutely,
or their whole career.
Absolutely, but it was great to go back. It was not a hard decision, and I figured I have the rest of my career to go to Miami.
Yeah, you can always go to Miami and join Murph down there, and get a suntan. You got sunburned to me, Murph. You were on light duty for 6 months after you got down there because you were sunburned so bad.
That's that English Irish heritage.
So when you got to Minneapolis, I know there's a lot of things, but a lot of people think there wasn't a lot going on in Minneapolis, but you talked about a real interesting case. So before we get into it, let's set the context. When you go up there, what were the big problems in Minneapolis? What kind of things was the office looking at up there when your task force was going out? What kind of things were you working on? What were the big problems DEA was interested in the Minnesota area?
Well, when I got to Minneapolis, almost every case was a cocaine case. All the sources were, it was all coming out of South Florida. There was, some heroin cases, but not so much. I think in the 5 years that I was in Minneapolis, almost every case I opened up was a coke case.
Anything from northern across the border up north? Anything from Canada coming in that were causing problems?
Now, Canada was interesting. Canada was more the marijuana back and forth. So not as much with Canada. We worked with the RCMP all the time. They would come down because a lot of their sources for cocaine were in Minnesota, were in Minneapolis. But
I just can't wait to hear an RCMP officer and somebody from Minnesota talking, hey, we were up there at Red Deer Lake. Hey, oh, yeah, for sure, don't you know? This would have been an interesting conversation.
Well, we always, we would celebrate when the Mounties would come down because my boss, the greatest boss in the world, Jim Brassett, he was my RAC, my resident agent in charge. He loved the Mounties. So it meant when the Mounties came down, we were going to do good cases, but we were also going to, have some fun. And because they can drink. There's no doubt they can drink.
Oh, hey,
yes, they can.
I went to a school with a guy from RCMP, Red Deer Lake, Alberta detachment up there. Couldn't hold a candle to this dude.
Yeah. And then they would bring my bosses, fishing up in Canada. So they had this love fest, our office, DEA, and the RCMP. We had all these great events going on. And we did good cases together. But it was Minnesota was just the perfect fit because I guess I thought, okay, I will stay here. I'll learn the job, learn to be a good agent here, and eventually maybe do something, maybe go to Miami, maybe, go to a big city at some point. But I was surprised when I was talking to my classmates who had been in those big cities. I actually was doing more in Minneapolis than a lot of them were because they had senior agents. Mm-hmm. They were kind of, hey, we were the gophers. We were supposed to be the gophers. You're young agents. You're supposed to, help your senior partner.
Pay your dues.
Yeah, you pay your dues. When I got to Minneapolis, though, it was just the environment set by Jim Brassett, just the best environment for me. And I talk about often with my friends, we talk about my first day in the Minneapolis office because, I went out and bought a brand new suit. I had my little brand new briefcase. I was ready, offices were supposed to.
It's almost like going back to Catholic school. You've got your uniform. You're ready to go.
I was ready. I had to make a good impression. Get there. Okay, the office opens at 8. Okay, I need to be there at 7:45. And I get there and nobody's there. There's nobody there.
Get in.
And I'm thinking, do I have the wrong office or what? So finally someone comes and opens up the office and it's one of the secretaries. And she welcomes me in and tells me, here's your desk. And I probably sat there for 2 hours before anybody came in.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting and in walks the boss, Jim Brassett. He comes over, introduces me. I put out my hand and he hugs me right away and he says, you need to go home and change. And I went, what? And he goes, we got a picnic today. We have liaison.
And that was for you folks that can't see. That she had air quotes with her fingers around the word liaison.